Hi class, welcome to week 5. Great job last week working on the discussion board and adding some, great references and theories and working from your textbook. I saw almost everyone doing some great, interesting engagement and some good dialogue and including some elements from the textbook that you all were reading last week. So please continue to build into the discussion board with those references, with those resources and those good in-text citations and kind of integrating a lot of what you were talking about with the concepts that you're learning about. Essentially, that creates a really good academically proficient conversation. And it gets people thinking about the terms in the textbook. This is such a fascinating topic, and it really, you get a lot of depth in this topic. So having people come in and kind of share the breadth of maybe a personal experience and adding it into the depth really creates a well-rounded discussion. So keep doing that, please, for the discussion board and into your short papers as well. So this particular week, week 5, you are looking into chapter 8 and chapter 9 of your textbook, which is focusing on friendship and different romantic relationships. So I'm just going to go over a couple major elements of both of those chapters and just hint on a couple aspects of things that might be a little bit more important to heed. Obviously, please take your time reading over the entire chapter. Also, the summaries in the back of the chapters, they do a pretty good job with giving you kind of a cohesive idea of what's going on in the chapter. In addition, you've got the references there. If you guys ever need an additional reference to build into your particular paper, like your short papers, just go into the back of the chapter and see what references your textbook have referenced. That is 100% okay to do. And find what articles those authors have written and add them into your short papers as a part of your reference list and use them in as your in-text citations as well. Also, there are different index, I guess maybe more like just like a table of keywords, key terms that are used in the chapters as well. Those kind of give you a nice little synopsis of what the definitions are of some of the keywords as well. That's kind of useful. So that being said, chapter 8, again, is all about friendships. And really, we are social creatures. And as social creatures, we need to be engaged in different types of relationships. Friendships are the ones that usually happen first, obviously. Those occur as children, and they grow and develop through the lifespan and go through very different stages. There are some very distinct differences between male and female friendships, but we find that male and females actually do want the same things out of friendships. It involves empathy, trust, self-disclosure, and then just an ability to feel like I can connect with somebody else. In addition, though, this is culturally driven. So keep that in mind, too, when you consider different people have different friendships based on where they're from. So in that aspect of the different friendships, you'll see within the chapter the differences between male-male friendships, male-to-female friendships. There are some slight differences there, but the main one is amongst self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is where you essentially are opening up to somebody. You're kind of discussing some major elements in your life that are going wrong. Somebody might think this is kind of a gab fest and maybe you're revealing too much of yourself. Obviously, it's going to be context driven, situationally driven, but females do tend to do this much more often than men. And self-disclosure is one of the things that tends to kind of build a relationship because it's I think showing the other person that you are vulnerable, that you are willing to trust them with some personal information. So this tends to give female to female relationships a much higher correlation with a satisfaction of friendship. So they have closer friendships. Like I said, it kind of might appear like a bit of a gab fest. Sometimes this can border into something called co-rumination. So ruminating is where you're just obsessing. No, it's not obsessing, it's healthily obsessing. You're just talking about the same thing over and over again. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. Must see somebody walking by the house. Sorry about that. But like I said, co-rumination is, it's a little bit more lighthearted aspect of ruminating. It's it's also correlated with a higher friendship, and in addition to that, higher levels of anxiety and maybe some depressive symptoms. So somebody who's always ruminating about something can lead into maybe a little bit more of an unhealthy aspect of conversation. So, but an interesting paradox of this is that when you do release some of these things that are troubling to you, it bonds you with somebody else, and it also is therapeutic. It's cathartic to talk about things. So normally, if you're ruminating about something, you talk about it with a friend, you get it out, you probably feel better most of the time. So, and again, this creates a bit of a friendship. So this kind of self-disclosure does actually build a lot of friendships and does a lot of other things as well for you. Males will self-disclose, but a lot of the times it's situationally motivated. So one interesting aspect of this is for you guys to consider is why? Why is this that females will self-disclose no problem? And keep in mind this is based on U.S. culture that this is discussed. It is kind of culturally a little bit varied in other cultures, but there is a tendency where most of the time it's females that self-disclose more than males. So again, why in the United States, in our culture, is that the case? Why do males tend to not want to self-disclose? Does it have something to do with social learning? So is it a learned thing? Is it just a socially driven aspect? So just something to consider. In addition, friendships do change over your lifespan. Obviously, you have a lot of friends in your teenage years, in your youth years, because you haven't had a romantic relationship yet. So friendships in your teen years are very important. You need to feel like part of the group. There's definitely an aspect to that. And they tend to decrease as you get into more of your marrying years and when your career is a little bit more into your main focus of things. And this is also very true for contemporary living socially now, with women. A lot, very, very many women work outside of the home, but yet they still have to maintain a household. So they just quite frankly don't have enough time to have a lot of friendships. So that is also another interesting kind of contemporary paradigm that's interesting, that really has been shifting for the last, I don't know, maybe like 60 years. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues to change and grow. Keep in mind that any of the trends that you're seeing now with friendships or romantic relationships, these are all socially constructed based on what's happening at a more macro, larger scale. So they will change. You will see lots of different trends and paradigms happening over your lifetime. In your retirement years, actually you find that the level of friendships tends to go up because sometimes our romantic relationships have ceased to exist. So we tend to gear more towards our friendships again. And you'll find that currently there are more female to female friendships in retirement ages than there are male to male, just because I think there's a little bit more of a trend to see women living longer than men still. Again, this will probably adjust over the next 50 to 100 years. So all that being said, I'm going to kind of move into talking about chapter 9, which is romantic relationships. This is probably one of the more, I think, applicable chapters. I think all the chapters are applicable to everybody, but this one definitely is, because we've all had romantic relationships and we've all, banged our head against the wall. What is wrong with that person? So this doesn't necessarily tell you what's wrong with the other gender or other sex, but gives you kind of some hints of maybe what's going on with some people. So mate preference and relationship satisfaction are the two aspects of this chapter that I want to just hint on briefly. So there's a couple different theories that go into mate preferences. There's the theory of evolution, which is mostly straight kind of genetic based and biologically driven. So it's kind of your appearance and what is required of you. So, men are going to pick the more evolutionarily attractive person who's going to reproduce with them. So it's pretty basic theory. One that kind of explains a little bit more of what's happening based upon our society nowadays is social role theory. And this is based upon like social paradigms that are occurring. Just based on with current gender roles and norms. And so, for example, sorry, come here, puppy. My dog's name is Hercules. He's a black lab, and he is protective when he sees somebody outside the window. Again, sorry for the interruption. Come here, pup. You stay with me. I'll have to introduce him to the class one video. Anyway, sorry. Social role theory is based upon, like I said, the social paradigm. So it goes along with the different gender role norms. So if you consider, that would kind of be where a man perhaps is making a little bit higher income. And so if he's doing that, he wants to look for a mate who is going to be a social match for him, will contribute to his social status, perhaps as well. So someone who is domestically inclined, also works. Education probably plays into this a little bit. So this is kind of your social role, where you're at. And then the last one is the different social construction. And this is very culturally driven. So keep that in mind as you're considering that one. The last thing we'll talk about here is relationship satisfaction. And again, this is also culturally driven. There are a couple of different elements within relationship satisfaction that will play into it. And one is power distribution. And that really happens based on a couple different things. So it can occur quite simply based on who seems to care the most or least. So it's kind of emotionally manipulative to some degree as well. But then you also see it as who has the say in the relationship. And that can be based upon education level, income, probably your gender role culturally might have an impact as well, what you're typically supposed to be doing. That can also all play into the power distribution within your relationship. And that factors into the relationship satisfaction. What your expectation, it's all expectation management too. You know, if you think that it's supposed to be equal and you're living in a relationship that it's not, then it's probably not going to be good for you. So equity comes in as a part of an element of relationship satisfaction. So this is how much do you put in, do you get in return? Is it equal? And this is very subjective. Do you view it as equal? Then you'll be happy. And then the social exchange theory is another aspect that really does describe relationship satisfaction. It's kind of looking at relationship satisfaction from an economic standpoint. So your costs and your benefits, are they equal, and is it worth it? Is what you're putting in getting out? But in addition, is it, I'd say probably it's context driven as well. Like when you take a step back, is somebody supporting you as much as you have supported them? So it's a little bit more complex than the equity. So the social exchange theory really does factor in quite a bit to the relationship satisfaction. So I would take a little bit of time to focus on that in your chapter, because that might apply into the next paper a little bit too. So for this week, again, this is week 5 and chapter 8 and chapter 9. And you are going to be doing a discussion board activity this week, and you're doing a short paper this week as well. Try to get the first entry for the discussion board in on Thursday, and then do the responses by Sunday. Please let me know if you are having an issue with the time. That's not a problem whatsoever. We can be flexible and accommodating to your needs. I know you all are working individuals with a family, so just keep me kind of abreast of what's going on with you, and we'll take it from there. So you guys have a great week, and thank you so much.